Imagine every piece of human knowledge, every discovery, every map, every cure, every proof, every poem, everything the ancient world had learned over thousands of years about medicine, mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, engineering, all of it in one building. Now imagine someone set it on fire. The Library of Alexandria held 700,000 scrolls at its peak, and almost all of them are gone. But here's the part that should actually unsettle you. We don't know what we lost, because the record of what was inside burned with it. We are living in the shadow of a library we will never read, and we have no idea what it could have changed. To understand what was lost, you first have to understand what it took to build it. The year is around 285 BC. Egypt is ruled by Ptolemy I, a Greek general who served under Alexander the Great. He's watched his master conquer half the known world. He's seen empires built on swords and war horses. But Ptolemy wants something different. He wants to build an empire of knowledge. He founds the Library in Alexandria, the city Alexander built at the edge of the Mediterranean, and gives it a mission that has never been attempted before in human history: collect every book ever written. Not some books, not the important ones. Every book, in every language, from every civilization. Ships docking in Alexandria's harbor were boarded, their scrolls confiscated, copied, and sometimes the originals were kept, the copies handed back. Scholars were brought in from across the ancient world, paid generously to live, think, teach and research inside a complex that included lecture halls, gardens, a communal dining room, and a reading room that could hold hundreds at once. It was the world's first research university, and at its height, it held 700,000 scrolls. In a world where every book was hand-copied, one letter at a time, 700,000 scrolls was an almost incomprehensible quantity of human thought in a single place. The writings of Aristotle lived here, Euclid, Archimedes, Sophocles, medical texts that described surgical procedures so advanced, historians believed they weren't matched in Europe for another 1,000 years. Star charts, maps, philosophical arguments that could have changed everything that came after. Euclid wrote his Elements here, the textbook of geometry still used in schools today. Archimedes studied here, the man who laid the foundations of calculus, mechanics, and hydrostatics 20 centuries before Newton was born. And Eratosthenes, the chief librarian, calculated the circumference of the Earth here in 240 BC, using nothing but a stick, a well, and the angle of sunlight. He was accurate to within 1%. In 240 BC, while most of the world was still debating whether the Earth was flat, a librarian in Alexandria had already measured it. But here's what the textbooks skip. The most shocking thing in that library wasn't any of the works we already know about. It was something we almost lost entirely. Something that, if it had survived, might have given us the future 400 years earlier. Among the scrolls in the Library of Alexandria was a text by an astronomer named Aristarchus of Samos. Written around 270 BC, it argued something that would get a man executed in certain centuries that came later. He argued that the Earth moves around the Sun, not the other way around. Aristarchus figured out the heliocentric model of the solar system in the 3rd century BC. We didn't officially rediscover it until Copernicus in 1543. That's a gap of 1,800 years. And the only reason we even know Aristarchus figured it out is because one reference to his work survived, inside another scholar's writing, a footnote. His original text, gone. We have a footnote where we should have a revolution. And that is just what we know we lost. Ancient sources tell us Sophocles wrote over 120 plays. We have 7. Aeschylus, perhaps 90 plays. We have 7. The medical texts from Alexandria described anatomical knowledge and surgical techniques that historians believe weren't matched in Europe for 1,000 years after the library burned. There were maps drawn with extraordinary accuracy, star charts, historical records of civilizations we now only vaguely know existed. And somewhere in those shelves, according to the ancient historian Galen, were the original manuscripts of Aristotle. Not copies, the originals, in his own handwriting. Gone. But here is the question I need you to hold on to, because the story of how the library burned is not the story you were taught in school. It didn't burn in one night. It didn't burn in one fire. And the people responsible for its destruction, none of them thought they were doing anything wrong. The year is 48 BC. Julius Caesar has pursued his rival Pompey to Alexandria. He arrives to find Pompey already dead, executed as a gift. And then a fire breaks out. Caesar ordered ships in the harbor set alight to prevent the Egyptian fleet from being used against him. The fire spread to the docks. Some ancient sources say it reached the library itself. Others say it took a nearby warehouse, an overflow storage facility holding tens of thousands of scrolls. Either way, a significant part of the collection burned. Caesar almost certainly didn't intend it, a military decision with a catastrophic accident attached. But intention doesn't bring the scrolls back. That was the first fire. The second came in 270 AD. Emperor Aurelian fought to retake Alexandria from the rebel queen Zenobia. The Roman quarter, where the academic district stood, was largely destroyed. The third came in 391 AD. Emperor Theodosius I declared paganism illegal across the Roman Empire. The Serapeum, a daughter library built to house the overflow, was torn apart by a Christian mob. The great mathematician and philosopher Hypatia was dragged from her carriage and murdered in the streets. 3 fires, 3 centuries, each one taking something that would never come back. But the fourth destruction came from a direction that started one of history's most bitter arguments. Because it didn't come from a conqueror who hated knowledge. It came from someone who believed, completely and sincerely, that he was doing the right thing. In 1641 AD, the Arab general Amir ibn al-As conquered Alexandria for Caliph Omar. The story, recorded centuries later, claims that Amir asked what should be done with the library, and the Caliph reportedly replied, "If the books agree with the Quran, they are unnecessary. If they disagree, they are dangerous. Burn them." The remaining scrolls, the story goes, were used to heat Alexandria's bathhouses for 6 months. By the 7th century, the Library of Alexandria, in any meaningful sense, was gone. Not in one dramatic night, not by one villain with a torch. Over 4 centuries of war, neglect, religious upheaval, and political indifference. It simply bled out. Nobody sat down and decided to destroy human knowledge. It just kept happening, quietly, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. Historians debate whether the Caliph's order happened exactly as recorded. It was written down centuries after the fact by writers who may have had reasons to cast the Arab conquest in a particular light. Many scholars believe it was at least partially fabricated. But that changes nothing about the conclusion. The library was gone, and the world that came after was measurably poorer for it. And now, we reach the question that has no answer. What exactly did we lose? We know about Aristarchus' heliocentrical model. We know about Sophocles' lost plays. But the most unsettling loss wasn't a scroll. It was a machine. The Antikythera mechanism, found in a Roman shipwreck in 1901, was a hand-sized mechanical device built around 100 BC that could predict the position of the planets, the timing of eclipses, and the schedule of the Olympic Games with extraordinary precision. It was the world's first analog computer. And after the ancient world burnt, the technology to build something like it disappeared for 1,500 years. 1,500 years. What else vanished with it? What other mechanical, medical, mathematical knowledge glimpsed in Alexandria, dissolved into ash before anyone could build on it? Here is the part that will stay with you. We will never know, because the catalogue of the library burnt too. There is no list, no index, no record we can search. We don't just not have the books. We don't even know the books existed. Historians have a term for this. They call it counterfactual. What might have been if things had gone differently? Could the Industrial Revolution have happened 1,000 years earlier? If Archimedes' full mechanical writings had survived? If the knowledge of gears, levers and pressure that the ancient world had already glimpsed had been preserved and built on, what would the 11th century have looked like? Could diseases that killed hundreds of millions have been cured sooner? The surgical knowledge from Alexandria's medical texts didn't resurface in Europe until the Renaissance. Could we have reached other planets sooner, ended suffering sooner, built a world that looks less like the one we inherited if 700,000 scrolls had simply survived? Nobody knows, and no one ever will. In 2002, Egypt opened a new library on the same site, the Bibliotheca Alexandrina. Modern, glass and stone and light. It holds 8 million books. 8 million. More than the ancient world could have conceived of. And yet, I wonder sometimes if somewhere in what we've already lost, there was a cure we are still searching for. A proof we haven't re-derived yet. A map to somewhere we don't know exists. The Library of Alexandria didn't die in a single dramatic fire. It bled out, slowly, through indifference, through conflict, through the grinding weight of centuries, and the quiet decisions of people who thought something else was more important. And the lesson it leaves, 3,000 years later, is not really about fire. It's about what happens when the people responsible for protecting knowledge stop trying. If this series has taught us anything, it's that erasure is never truly accidental. The men who chiseled Hatshepsut's name for the monuments knew what they were doing. The priests who tore down Akhenaten's temples knew what they were doing. The politicians who slowly defunded Alexandria, the generals who chose to burn the docks, the authorities who looked away as the mob moved towards the Serapeum. They all made a choice. If you haven't watched our videos on Hatshepsut and Akhenaten yet, they're part of this same series, and they go deeper into the question of who gets to decide what history remembers. Links are here. And drop a comment. Tell me this, what do you think we're forgetting right now? Because Alexandria wasn't the last library, and history has a habit of repeating itself when no one's paying attention.